So I'm going to keep this very general, but I have to share. Long post and first-time poster, so please be kind. Also, please keep in mind that I was 22 years old and not even out of grad school when all of this went down. I'm a therapist, and while I was in grad school, I began an internship that provided group and individual counseling for a halfway house. This halfway house was run by a church and their well-meaning congregation, but it was a bit of a mess. After several months of working with them, I got a phone call from the, quote, house parent, unquote, that said none of the residents were willing to attend group sessions if their new housemate would be involved. The house parent made some comments about typical house drama, so I wasn't worried about it and just told them to go ahead and bring the residents to the clinic, and I would work with the new housemate privately to figure out what was going on. I met with the new housemate first, and they seemed a bit reserved and untrusting, but nice. When I asked about issues in the house, they gave a small curved smile and a raspy chuckle, scoff. I pushed them a bit further, but all they would say was that the others were scared. We ended our session agreeing to meet weekly. I had the group session next, new housemate not included, to get a feel with what was going on from the others. When I walked in, I could tell there was something seriously wrong. Their faces looked terrified, their general appearances were disheveled, and they were all looking anxiously at each other. I asked what was going on, no one answered. They asked me what I thought of the new housemate, and I redirected it back to them. The anxious eye contact continued. I asked again, and I reminded them change and growth could not occur without honesty. Finally, one of them started talking. Here is the story from that perspective. They said, "We were told that we were getting a new housemate that we weren't supposed to have that much interaction with, and that they wouldn't be there long. No one would give us any info about why the new housemate was getting the only private bedroom or why they wouldn't be participating in classes or group activities. They just told us, leave them be." This went on for about 2 weeks. Then they started letting the new housemate hang out and participate in things. They would make some strange comments that made us uncomfortable, but we would just ignore them. They wouldn't sleep. They would always leave their bedroom after they thought everyone was asleep, go into our rooms and check to see if we were actually asleep by holding their finger under our nose. Then they would leave and walk through the backwoods. They would always be back in the morning, and we would tell the house parent, but we'd be told to be quiet and not to talk about this with anyone. One night after dinner, we turned on ID channel and new housemate was watching us. But a few minutes into the episode, they got up and walked into the woods. A few minutes later, we heard it. Their name in the episode. We couldn't be sure, so we went to the computer and checked and saw that they had tortured and murdered several women. There's more details to the story that I can't share, but needless to say, my client was a convicted serial killer that tortured and murdered at least 3 women in our area. They were being let out on a technicality that affected several of the murders they were charged with, so got released early on the condition that they lived under supervision. This particular halfway house was being paid to, quote, hold, unquote, this person until a more appropriate structure was in place. After I had done my own research and confirmed this, I went to my supervisor and my professor, and the contract with that particular church and halfway house was terminated. Icing on the cake, the next year of my life was absolute hell, as I was stalked, my home invaded, my dogs injured, and my house and car vandalized, and survival items that didn't belong to me were found in my attic that made it look like someone had been living there. I would come home and the house would look different than the way I left it. The police came to my house over a dozen times and did nothing. So my family hired a security team and installed cameras. 6 months later, a perpetrator was arrested on my property, and eyewitnesses and evidence linked him to the crimes. The perpetrator had been out of prison for just over a year on rape and kidnapping charges. Guess who was from the same small hometown as the man arrested? My client. Edit. Here are some answers to a lot of the questions. This incident was over 10 years ago and the stalker is still in jail. I had just bought the house the week prior to all this starting, so couldn't move somewhere else, no money. Several friends offered to let me stay with them, but police and psychiatrists believed that the stalker would just follow me because he was already fixated on me. I have no idea if that's how it works, but I listened. There was no evidence of a connection between the stalker and the serial killer, but my brain sometimes begs me not to believe that. I lived in that house alone for another 3 years and then got married and lived there for 2 more years with my husband. I never felt at rest in that home, obviously. We are in a new home now, and with the help of lots of dogs, cameras, home security, and a great therapist, I'm doing great, though I do have severe night terrors from PTSD. I really have no idea if they're both connected, the serial killer to the stalker. It just makes the story much creepier and turns the wheels in my head. There wasn't ever anything presented to me as if they knew each other or planned anything together. I just find it super crazy that they are both from the same hometown, and I had run-ins with both. In my head, I used to picture the person leaving the halfway house through the woods and getting to my house and watching me, but there is zero evidence to back this up. The stalker lived directly behind me across a creek, and police told me that he was part of the construction crew renovating my home and made a copy of the key. This, of course, makes sense to me, but I do sometimes wonder. I may do a second one with all of the details of the stalking. There were some incredibly strange things, like the first time I realized someone was coming in and out of my house, I got the locks changed. The morning after, I was on the phone with my mother while I was sweeping up leaves off of my patio. I didn't get to finish before I needed to jump into the shower to get to class. When I came out 45 minutes or an hour later, my patio was cleaned, leaves were bagged, and the old key to the old locks was sitting on my doormat. Mostly everyone agreed that he was getting off on my reactions of being terrified, so I would try and just ignore it until I got somewhere where I could break down. About 3 weeks into this, a man in my graduate program, a good friend, stayed with me for a few days. On the last day, he left to go to class. He called me in a total panic and said the cops were on their way and to go into the bathroom, lock the door, and wait for them. A hole had been punctured into his gas tank, and he was broken down on the side of the road, petrified. The stalker did this to get him away from me in a way that he couldn't get back. The cops, of course, took almost an hour to get there. After this incident, my family hired a PI and a security team. While they were there, nothing. As soon as they left, it started again. Security team came back 2 weeks later and went through my house to see if there were any cameras. I asked to not know, and I still have no idea. Then I'm washing my face, getting ready to leave, when I hear my dogs losing it, like they're fighting. I then hear my female screaming. So I run out of my room and see the window to my living room was all the way open and the screen was removed. One dog was losing his mind in the fenced-in area, which is separate from the house, and the other dog was missing, but I could hear. Their gate was wide open. She was in the creek behind my house when I got to her. She had been hit in the face and thrown into the creek. A side note, the stalker was not charged with anything having to do with me. I am both thankful and infuriated about this. They had his fingerprints. They couldn't use them because he was part of the construction crew that was working on the house, so they didn't prove anything. They searched his house to look for my missing items, bras, undies, journal, but never found them, so couldn't link him to me. I saw him 2 days before he was arrested on my property opening the screen door. I'd forgotten something and ran back to get it. He was arrested 2 days later for breaking and entering a different house. I later positively identified him as the guy that was on my property. But again, there wasn't anything they could use to charge him with a crime against me. Because he was arrested while he was on parole and now had multiple felonies, they told me he wouldn't be getting out. I hope that's true and will definitely be keeping track. Going forward, one of the things I'd like to do with this series is to, yes, number one, of course, read you the creepy encounters that have come from my subreddit. One other thing I'd like to do is to also offer commentary or advice on how to keep what's happened in the story from happening to you. But on this one, I'm stumped. I do not know what advice I could offer on prevention on this one. In the comments, someone suggested she get a dog. Well, she did. Someone suggested she buy a gun. She did. Someone suggested did she marry Kevin McAllister. She did not do that. He is a fictional character in a movie and also a kid. The only thing I can add to that is move to space. I don't know. But these are the kinds of creepy encounters that bother me the most out of all of them, because this is just a person minding their business. They're not fighting with anyone. They're not talking in Walmart. You know, they're not committing a crime and something is happening to them. They're literally just minding their business. In the case of the serial killer, this person is still in grad school and going to work as a therapist when they're met with a serial killing, torturing patient that happens to be out of prison on a technicality. That couldn't have been avoided. And as far as the stalker, I mean, this person has just achieved the American dream. They've been able to buy their first home. They have the money to remodel it. And it comes with a stalker who thinks it's a good idea to sleep in their attic and stab holes in their friends' gas tanks. I don't know how you avoid these types of things. If any of you do, besides my genius idea of moving to space, please post it down below. Let us know if there's anything different you would have done in this situation. I don't think there's anything different she could have done. And also, please take a moment to help us out with the algorithm. You can subscribe to the channel, leave a like if you liked the video, a dislike if you didn't, and leave a comment if you can, even if it's just, hi.